You need to carry this way in.
We're going to mute the room, but we'll be on in just a moment.
I know with the weather, we don't want to delay you any and headed back out into that later this evening. All right, thank you. Welcome everyone to the Micromobility Pilot Project Public Engagement Meeting. We really thank you for coming out in person, even with this weather, or for logging in to the Zoom. I'm Katie Harrison. I'm the engineering manager with the City of Reno Public Works Department. And with me tonight is Sarah Going, engineer and project manager with the Regional Transportation Commission. And we're here tonight to discuss the findings of the pilot project and then discuss what the next steps are for micromobility in the downtown region. We have roughly a 20 to 30 minute presentation. And then we'll open it up to questions for a period. And then we definitely have some availability. If you want to get in depth on certain topics or look at some of the maps, we can do that as well afterwards. So again, thank you for coming. We know your time is very valuable and we appreciate your participation and feedback. So let's dive into the presentation. This is a little awkward. We'll roll with it. All right, so here's an overview of the presentation. First, we'll talk about why we're interested in micromobility, both in Reno and regionally in the Truckee Meadows. Next, we'll go into the scope of the pilot project that took place last summer and fall. Then we'll move into the results of both the technical LiDAR component of the study as well as the public survey. Then we'll discuss the next steps in applying these types of tools moving forward. And we'll wrap up with questions and feedback. And I'll pass it over to Sarah to discuss micromobility regionally.
Thank you, Katie. All right, so let's talk about micromobility. So for those who may not know, micromobility is referring to those small personal vehicles like bicycles, e-scooters, and e-bikes that generally travel less than 20 miles per hour. We're really interested in these because we know them as a transportation form to be very efficient, both space-wise and energy efficient. They're also very cost efficient, equitable. But for us at the Regional Transportation Commission, our primary concern is really in the mobility portion. So I've underlined mobility up here. And what we know about micromodes and what we know about our region in general is that we really have a need to move more people. If you see this map on the right, we're experiencing a lot of growth in the region, and that's brought in more traffic. Sorry, adjusting. And that's brought in more traffic and a need to move more people through the region. So something we know about micromodes is that they're particularly well suited to trips, especially less than 5 miles. And something that we know in our region is that there's over 570,000 daily trips less than 5 miles in our region. From other cities and areas who have implemented a high level of bicycle infrastructure, we know that a 5% mode share capture, so we're estimating about 5% of people would ride bicycles. If we take 5% of those 500,000 vehicles, we get around 28,000 vehicles per day. And to put that in perspective, that's as many vehicles as our most used spaghetti bowl ramps. So it's a really, really significant number of trips. People ride, why aren't we seeing more people out here right now? So this image I'm showing up here is based on national surveys about people and how they feel about bicycling in particular. So you can see that not shown here is the 30 to 40% of people who survey and say they won't ride no matter what the bicycle infrastructure looks like. They're not really interested. And then you have a smaller portion of people who are already very confident riding. They're comfortable riding with vehicle traffic. And then you see over on the right, there's the largest portion of the population that's not really comfortable riding with vehicle traffic. And we call that the interested but concerned rider group. So knowing this, we know a lot of our network requires bicyclists and scooterers to ride with vehicle traffic. So we know that our existing network doesn't really serve this largest portion of the population. So how do we redesign our streets for more riders to attract those interested but concerned people? And it really comes down to, and I could make a whole presentation on this slide alone, but it really comes down to providing separation from traffic, especially higher volumes of traffic and higher speeds of traffic. And that's very important. It's also important to reduce those conflicts at intersections so people can make movements at intersections, each mode, without conflicting with each other. And it's also important to have a continuous and connected route to where you want to go. This was really reiterated by some community workshops that also happened in the same time the pilot project was happening. And that was the League of American Bicyclists Bicycle Friendly American workshop. And so local agency staff and also the public participated in both of these workshops. One was hosted by the UNR Bicycle Working Group, and the other was hosted by the Truckee Meadows Bicycle Alliance. And these really reiterated the need to provide a higher level of separation in environments of higher vehicle speeds and higher traffic, and also to improve continuity and connectivity in the overall network. So it sounds pretty easy, but there's actually a lot of implementation challenges, of course. Like I mentioned before, our major arterials are experiencing growth in traffic. That's real. And these are also arterials that are right-of-way constrained. And so adding more things to those roads is really, really challenging. We also have limited resources, and we do have a need to prioritize those resources across the region. And also many of the features that are micromobility specific that we can use in infrastructure haven't been implemented in our region. So they're very new to the public. And that's something I'll talk about in the pilot project in a few minutes. But opportunities do exist. So for all of these really high speed, high volume arterials, we have a lot of adjacent streets that have excess capacity and they do not have the same traffic volume growth, mostly because they're not freeway connected. And there's also a really great public interest in micromobility, and we see that again and again in our public outreach. So I'll talk and do a little bit overview about this micromobility pilot project that went on this summer. There were, like I talked about before, I've kind of set the scene for you. So there are several goals to this project. And it was to introduce those new micromobility specific features to the community in a cost-efficient and temporary manner. And it's also to collect community feedback about how people interacted with those features. And also we used it as an opportunity to perform a technical study where we collected volumes and conflict rates. And also we analyzed where users were within the right-of-way. So what facility were they using when they were riding, walking, and driving. And the goal of this overall project is really to inform future installations. It's really all about the infrastructure. How do we apply it region-wide? So I'll talk a little bit about each of these infrastructure features. It's a little engineering, a little technical, but I hope people showed up today, so this is what they're interested in. So the first one I'm going to talk about is buffered lanes. You might hear these also referred to as separated bicycle lanes or protected bicycle lanes. And so these can come on the pilot project. These were tested in a few variations, just with a painted buffer, with a raised barrier, mostly candlesticks, and also temporary barrier, and also with a parking protected barrier. So meaning we flipped, if you think of your standard bike lane cross section where bicyclists are riding adjacent to traffic, we flipped the parking in the bicycle lane. So the bicycle lane was on the curb side and the parking lane was adjacent to traffic. Next, we tested the two-way track, and this was implemented on Virginia Street from 5th to 2nd Street. And so a two-way track basically has two-way bicycle and scooter traffic in one facility. Instead of riding with traffic in each direction, we reduced Virginia Street down to one way and used that extra space to provide two-way traffic for bicycle and scooter movements. Like I mentioned before, intersections are particularly challenging when integrating bicycle facilities. And so one of the features we can use is called a protected intersection. And so the main focus of this feature is that it provides an advanced stop bar for micromobility users so that drivers are able to see them at the intersection to provide better visibility. It also provides for cyclists to do something we call a two-stage left turn. So you can turn and make vehicle movements at the intersection without mixing with vehicle traffic. The next feature we also tested were bicycle boxes, and similarly to the protected intersection, this puts cyclists right in the front of the intersection to improve visibility. Finally, we also tested bicycle signals, and these provide a dedicated bicycle phase for those micromobility users that stops all vehicle traffic so that there's no conflicting movements happening together. Features, I'm going to pass it back to Katie to talk a little bit about the outcomes of the LiDAR study and the public survey that was conducted. Yes, we're about the same height. Thanks, Sarah. So here's the schedule that we had for the pilot project. The features were constructed in late May of last year, and the project officially opened to the public on June 15th. We then entered the community feedback phase, where we did technical data collection with LiDAR, as well as collected public feedback through an online survey. And we're currently wrapping up the data analysis phase, where we're processing both of these types of data. And we're here tonight in the public engagement meeting to present those findings. And then we will conclude the pilot portion of the project with a presentation to City Council and the second meeting in April. Right, so this slide shows the two types of data that were collected throughout the pilot project. First, we collected technical data using LiDAR, which I'll discuss in the next couple of slides. And we also collected user feedback and experience data through an online survey, as I mentioned. It allowed us to gauge feedback both on specific features and the project as a whole.
Now, we're very fortunate to live in a community that has world-class researchers up at the university, and the RTC partnered with UNR's Center for Advanced Transportation Research Group on a LiDAR-assisted study of the project. Now, LiDAR stands for Light Detection and Ranging, and it allows us to collect data on the volumes, speeds, and locations of users within the street or sidewalk space, and also to visualize conflicts between those different users. Now, the top left photo shows the equipment that's used to collect this data, and it's mounted to street poles or traffic signals. And the LiDAR sensors generate cloud points that can be analyzed to classify user types and also track those users' movements. So that middle photo, although I realize it's kind of hard to see, shows what those cloud points look like. And then also they're bracketed different colors for the different user types. So pedestrians, scooters, bikes, et cetera. And then the top right shows how those users' movements are mapped. It's a ton of data, as you can see there, lots of points and a lot of data processing too, but it is a wealth of knowledge. So we collected data at 9 sites throughout the pilot project over 3 separate rounds in May, June, and September. So round 1 data was collected before the features were installed to give us kind of a baseline. And rounds 2 and 3 were collected after the features were implemented. And round 3 was after UNR was back in session. Present the results of this data, and we'll keep it pretty high level for this presentation due to time. But for all you data geeks out there, the final LiDAR report from UNR breaks it out by intersection, by user type, really gets into the weeds if that's something that you're interested in reviewing. So this slide shows the overall volumes of both automobiles and micromodes. So the data was collected over a 2-day period, covering both a weekday and a weekend. And we broke it out for 5th Street and Virginia to look at the specific corridors. Now, to kind of walk through the graph, the left side has the automobile volumes and the right side has the micromode volumes for bikes and scooters. And the color coding is that blue is before and orange and gray is during. So blue's before we implemented the features and the other 2 are after. So the graph left shows the automobile volumes. And I want to note that on 5th Street, which was the left of the left graph, we reduced the number of through lanes on 5th Street from 2 lanes in each direction to 1 lane in each direction. But the automobile volumes actually increased after the features were implemented, which indicates that excess capacity that Sarah was talking about, that we were able to still move the vehicles effectively. Now, the reduction in vehicle volumes shown in the Virginia piece was due to that removal of the northbound vehicle traffic during the pilot project. Now, on the right-hand side for micromodes, both bike and scooter volumes increased with the installation of the pilot project features. On 5th Street, the micromodes increased by approximately 40%, and on Virginia, they more than doubled. So next, we're on to the micromobility behavior, or basically where are bikes and scooters riding within the roadway section. And again, blue is before, orange and gray is after. So what are we seeing here? Before the project, roughly 70% of bikes and scooters were riding on the roadway, and the remaining roughly 30% were riding on the sidewalk. And after the installation, you can see the reason there's no blue in the lane for round 1 is because those lanes hadn't been implemented yet. But after the installation of those lanes, roughly half of bikes were using the lanes and 70% of scooters. And if you look at 5th Street specifically, that increased for scooters to 80% utilizing those micromode lanes. Now we looked at conflicts between users next. And I really want to emphasize conflicts do not equal crashes. The study identified a conflict as any time 2 different roadway users were in the same space within 2 seconds of each other. So basically, if I'm walking across the street and I'm at one spot in the road and a car passes that same place within 2 seconds of me, that would have been counted as a conflict. We also looked at conflict rate rather than the total number of conflicts because it provides a more effective comparison when there's large variations in the number of users. Again, blue before, orange and gray after, and we broke out the various types of conflict rates: vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to pedestrian, vehicle to bicycle, vehicle to scooter, and then total average among all road users. Looking at that total conflict rate, it was reduced by 1/4 to 1/2 with the installation of the micromode features. Bicycles and scooters conflict rates with vehicles saw the most significant reduction, but it's an interesting item to note that the vehicle to vehicle conflict rate also decreased by over 1/2 with the installation of the infrastructure. And I promise only one more graph for you to bear with me, and I'm going to grab some water. On from the technical data collection to the community feedback. And the city received over 1,000 survey responses with this project. And the breakdown was roughly 600 automobile users, over 400 micromode users, and over 60 pedestrians. So the survey, if you weren't able to view it during the pilot project itself, it asked about the overall project along with questions on each of the various features that Sarah went through. And this slide shows the respondents' level of satisfaction with the project as a whole. Overall, more than half of the respondents felt positive or neutral about the project. And among micromode users, that increased to 85%, but decreased to 30% with the automobile users. Comments from micromode users generally centered around increased feelings of safety and lower traffic stress with that increased separation from vehicles. And comments from auto users generally included the dislike of the removal of the northbound lanes on Virginia and that the roadway felt tighter. And again, only showing one of the graphs for the feedback results, but with the final report, we have them also broken out for all the separate features. But to summarize those, the overall, the buffered micromode lanes that Sarah discussed, the one lane on either side of the road, that had the highest satisfaction rate, with 90% of micromode users feeling positive or neutral about them, and nearly half of auto users feeling the same. Also, the intersection rated higher than bike boxes for those intersection features. And as the pilot project progressed, we took community input on additional need for education, and we did a couple of things. First, we included media and social media campaign with quick and easy to visualize user guides, some of those shown on the right, to help explain, where do I park, or where do I stop ahead of a bike box, or where do I park now that the parking's moved on a parking protected bike lane. And we also produced a video showing a ride through of the project features and how to use them. And finally, the last bullet, that nearly half of respondents said that these features would make them more likely to bike or walk downtown instead of drive. And of those that said that it wouldn't, it was split. There were those who preferred to drive, but there were also those who would bike or ride scooters regardless of the infrastructure. And if you remember Sarah's slide from the beginning, this matches pretty well with those bicyclist design user profiles and trying to really target that interested but concerned. So to summarize, adding this type of infrastructure increased the number of micromode users through those corridors. And it also decreased the conflict rates for all of the roadway users, not just micromodes. We gained valuable feedback from the community on the items that were working and the items that weren't working as they were installed. And this will help us inform future installations. And we know education is critical, and that's something that will continue as we build the multimodal network in the region. So what happens next? I think that's probably a big reason why a lot of you are here. This project helped us evaluate the tools in the toolbox. So now we're looking to how do we apply these tools and what we've learned on projects moving forward. First, the city's in the final public engagement stages of the Virginia placemaking study. I know a lot of you were here a couple of weeks ago for that engagement session. And the recommendations presented by Gail at that included micromobility features. Also, the City of Reno and the RTC are working closely on some funding that was allocated to purchase additional path sweepers. We know that's a big component to this type of network is maintenance. And also Truckee River Path repairs. We know the Truckee River Path is a critical east-west corridor throughout our region, and there's definitely some sections that need some love. So we're prioritizing some of those repairs coming in the spring and early summer. And then finally, looking to evaluate these types of features on our roadway projects moving forward. But Sarah will talk next steps regionally.
All right, region-wide. So RTC runs a transportation program, starting with, I'll start with the long-range planning, and we'll come back into some of the near-term work that we're doing. Long-range, we're actually starting this spring on our active transportation plan. And so active transportation encompasses bicycling, walking, and also wheeling. And so that's a more focused study on just those modes. And that's an active transportation plan that'll kick off in May. In the near term, we are looking to advance some of the projects that are in our 2050 regional transportation plan, and this was approved in 2020. And I'll talk a little bit more about those projects now. So we're thinking about growing the network, and we're asking how can we apply these tools better region-wide. We have a number of projects that were identified, again, in our regional transportation plan. We're really starting to focus in the Reno downtown core, because that's where there's the highest capacity to capture those less than 5 mile trips. There's a high density of those kinds of trips. These streets were identified in the Reno Downtown Circulation Study, which was included in the RTP process. And it's also the methodology behind the selection of these streets is to balance those high speed, high volume vehicle corridors with a slower speed streets that are more designed for vulnerable road users. So bicyclists and pedestrians in particular are considered vulnerable road users. How do we move that forward? Next steps, we're looking to develop some more concepts for these streets so we can get an idea of the trade-offs on these streets, what kind of impacts there will be, what kind of cross sections we can look at, and the overall cost of those projects. And we're also, like Katie mentioned before, we are going to take this micromobility pilot project presentation to the Reno City Council and also the RTC board. So after we've developed some concepts where we want to bring them back to the public, and in the May timeframe, around the time we're starting our active transportation plan, looking more broadly at the region. And then later on this summer, we will also take those concepts back to the RTC board and the Reno City Council, which are our directing bodies. So with that, I think we're ready to move into any questions you might have. You're welcome to speak, or we also have comment cards over on the side. If you're not comfortable, please submit a comment. And also, yep, the QR code made it up there. So if you don't want to find the website, you can just scan the QR code and you can also make a comment on the website. So thank you so much.
Sorry, this is Amy Pennington. I just also want to say, if you are online on Zoom and would like to make a comment, please raise your hand and we will go back and forth between the room and Zoom for questions.
Hi, I'm Matt Manser. I'm a cyclist and also an Uber driver, and I'm streets very well. I have one question that I haven't seen anybody answer anywhere. Does the city get a kickback from the Bird Scooter Company? And my observation is it's just a giant go-kart track downtown in the evenings with these bird scooters zipping around. You may say there's 700 people that pass by your choke points there with your LiDAR, but how do you know it's just not a group of 20 kids riding laps downtown like they're doing every Friday and Saturday night? It's also very dangerous. Talk to anybody that works in the emergency room, and they'll tell you Friday and Saturday night, that's all they see is scooter accidents. Talk to the person that scraped their face off the day before they were supposed to get married on a bird scooter. So does anybody have the answer? Does the city get a kickback from Bird Scooter? And why are they allowed to have their own personal go-kart track downtown?
I'll try to answer that question. Carrie Koski, your Director of Public Works. So the city has a contract with the Bird Scooter folks, and they provide a service to us. They are charged we get a certain rate from the scooter being in the public right-of-way and using public right-of-way. We get a fee from them. It's not a kickback, it's a fee. Yes, we have a negotiated contract that I don't know the fee off the top of my head, but I do know that we did bring that whole program to our city council, and that was approved. Done in a vacuum, put it that way.
So is it okay if I go to see go-karts? Is that go-kart? The scooters?
Can you use that?
Yeah.
You can use.
It's just joyriding by tourists and local kids. And there's another scary fact about it. Kids downtown or at the university, if they think they can get a DUI from driving, they think it's a legitimate way to get back from the bar after they believe that.
Comments.
This is just a reminder to the room. We just need to make sure that we're using microphones for the Q&A and comments so that the comments are being able to be heard by everybody who's participating in the meeting.
Thank you for that reminder.
My name is Jim Galloway, and I'm a resident of the Palladio, a block away from here. And you did a very good presentation. The one thing that is not considered is how micromobility affects senior citizens. I can't get on a scooter. I can't ride a bicycle any longer. So if you had three-wheeled vehicles for rent and the scooters and something like that, it'd be very helpful. But the other aspect is in the micromobility study, you talk about within 5 miles. I still think we got to bring back something like the Sierra Spirit so that we can get transportation in and around UNR, downtown, and midtown. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Yes, and that's one of the things that we want to look at in our active transportation plan. As far as the different types of uses, we talked about scooters. One of the things that I'm very passionate about is ADA accessibility and three-wheeled vehicles, or not vehicles, but scooters or wheelies, I guess they call them. We want to look at the infrastructure that we put in that can accommodate those types as well. And we have been in conversations with the Bird Scooters folks about providing accessible types of scooters, not just the two-wheel. I'm not sure where we landed on that. I think winter hit and most of the scooters kind of disappeared, but back in the spring, that topic will come up again.
All right, well, we'll go to someone online. Sure. This is Bill Schimpf. Are you able to unmute yourself?
I think that got it. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the presentation. Really appreciate it and putting the data together and looking at this. I drive through downtown on a regular basis. I also sit on the Ward 1 Neighborhood Advisory Boards. Some of these comments are people that have come to the board and expressed concerns through their public comment, and some of these are my own as well. But one of the things that I heard, and maybe I heard it wrong, was your data collection period for the study, was that 2 days? Did I hear that correctly?
So there were 3 data collection periods, basically, and each of those periods encompassed a set of 2 days, essentially. So it's just kind of a snapshot.
Okay, and you feel that the 2 days is a sufficient time frame for each of those to come to a conclusion?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The purpose of the study is not necessarily to be definitive about the infrastructure. The Federal Highway Administration has already approved all of these implementation types. So it's just to study how people in our area interact with it and to gather more data for our use in future implementation.
Okay. Is there a reason it wasn't like 7 days or 2 weeks or something like that?
Yeah, there's definitely, so as Katie mentioned, the LiDAR collects a massive amount of data. And so it's really just a limitation of how long those LiDAR units can collect data and also how that data can be broken down and managed.
Okay, thank you. The other two things, parking and business access with both bicycles and the scooters have been brought up, and I still see it. There's on Lakeside Drive right now, there's a bird scooter frequently parked in front of one of the entrances to an apartment building. So I hope that going forward, as the city and RTC, whoever the responsible agency is, they participate with Bird. And when you guys are looking at the striping of the streets and the layout, that you designate with the striping, like, hey, here's a good safe place to put your scooter. Here's where you put your bike so that it doesn't interfere with businesses, business access to people who are either walking to the business or vehicle traffic. So if we could just keep that in mind, that would be great. The reason I ask about the 2-day data collection too is when you drive through downtown, when there's one of the, like a wine crawl or one of the crawls that are frequent down there, what happens on those scooters and the bikes is very different than what happens on another Friday night. So I appreciate there's some education going on, but I think some enforcement of DUI and other traffic laws, do those apply to people on a Bird scooter or a bicycle?
I'm going to let Suzanne LaFonte answer that question. She is our Bird scooter expert. So
okay,
over to Suzanne.
So yes, so it depends on which rule is being broken. If it is violating a law, it is against the law. If it's violating a bike law, it is against the law. There are some rules that are set forth in our franchise agreement that aren't necessarily laws that somebody is breaking, but there are rules that we're asking people to follow. So it depends on what rule they're breaking.
Okay. Now, the one thing that comes up real specifically to me is I remember seeing like a group of 3 or 4 guys like just driving around in a circle on Keystone and Second, like while the stoplights were changing. You know, I was like, there's got to be some way to like figure out, okay, somebody's being a knucklehead. Let's find a way to disincentivize knucklehead behavior. I'm sure Bird has some sort of technology that could help with that.
Yeah, thank you so much for your comments. We are going to continue on with, there's a lot of more people who want to say a few things. So thank you so much, Bill, for your comments. We will go back to a question in the room, and just so enough people, or so everyone has a chance to speak, let's just try to keep our questions to about a minute, and we'll continue moving along to as many people as possible.
That's going to be hard for me to do a minute, but I will try. Okay. First one is what conclusions did you draw from the conflicts, or from the lowering the amount of conflicts and more scooter traffic? Meaning, like, that is a finding. What was the conclusion that was drawn? That makes sense? Virginia Street.
Yeah, so the decrease in the conflict rate indicates that the increased separation is better for both sets of traffic, right? The more separation you can have between an automobile and a micromode user, that reduces the opportunity for conflict between the two.
And then obviously the more scooter traffic as well. I guess my question is so how about, what was the overall traffic? Did it overall increase, or did it overall decrease? Because I know you increased the scooter traffic because you put in scooter lanes, yep. But what about the overall? I
understand you now, thank you. And that was why we looked at the rate, because if you increase the number of traffic, you would expect the overall number of increase that could increase, but to normalize that to the increase of both users, that was why we used the rate rather than the total number of conflicts. Correct. And so accounting for both of them, that was how you came to the rate. And then
And overall volumes on 5th Street did increase, and volumes on Virginia Street decreased because we reduced southbound traffic, and that influenced the vehicle volumes.
Okay, yeah. Well, because the reason why I ask is because, like he said, honestly, it was the lowering of the traffic was massively detrimental to the businesses downtown. I guess where my question would be is did you guys draw the conclusion of that this is good for downtown and what happened, and that's something that we should pursue, or is that something that is something that was detrimental? Because being in a business downtown, I can tell you, for business, it was not good.
I can take a stab at that one. Okay. Hi, Amy Pennington with Public Works. One of the findings was, or a lot of the feedback that actually Katie mentioned was that reducing traffic on Virginia Street to 1 lane was not desired at the outcome of the study. And so that's one of the reasons why it's not continued to be that way. And our recommendation from Gail from the placemaking study is to maintain northbound and southbound traffic on Virginia Street, as that is important to Virginia Street. So future plans for Virginia Street would include making sure that north and southbound traffic are maintained. Sure, we'll head to an online question with Tom Albright.
Hi, thanks for the informative presentation. It was very interesting. I had a question with conflicts. Were you able to track micromobility to pedestrian? I'm particularly thinking about if we're getting people off sidewalks, or not people, if we're getting wheeled conveyances like bikes and scooters off sidewalks, does that actually benefit people who use the sidewalks, including folks with disabilities? Although some of the folks with disabilities might want to use the micromobility depending on what they're riding. Any insights on that? Thank you.
Sure. So a major component of the LiDAR study was to analyze where people are riding within the right-of-way. So are people on the sidewalks? Are they in the vehicle roadway, or are they in the micromobility lanes? And Katie presented a slide about that once the pilot project was implemented, there was a major shift from the split between riding in the roadway and riding on the sidewalk over to the micromobility lanes.
Can we look at slide 20 really quick? Because that reduction in conflict is really important. And looking at the more people out riding, increased users, decreased conflict. So you're saying that this is only over 2 days, right? Each time, is that right? So if we're looking at a reduction from 9 conflicts over 2 days to just 3, a 60% reduction. Or half, something like that, is incredible. And so that and downtown in particular, where people are being hit and killed, is a really serious issue that needs to be addressed. And so reducing that conflict makes a huge difference. My question here is that we've seen the success of this in terms of reducing conflict in a really high density area. And as we enter into the RTP, we know that schools have really high density of short distance trips, 5 miles or less. Is there a plan to include this kind of management in the RTP for schools specifically, and to look at those areas? Hi, Plasgun from the Truckee Meadows Bicycle Alliance.
Dan, actually.
We're going to let Dan.
We're going to bring up Dan Dunges, the RTC Planning Director.
Thank you. And you guys hear me? Okay. Thank you, Kai. That's a great question. And just to, I guess, confirm you're talking about the active transportation plan that will be kicking up, right? Yeah, okay. Because Sarah did show a slide of the regional transportation plan, which is our kind of our long-term outlook, and which is where a lot of the proposed projects came from. But we are working to kick off an active transportation plan, which is going to focus very much on pedestrian, bicycle, scooter use. And so we are really looking at the type of facilities that best fit that surrounding land use. And so schools are absolutely important. They're kind of their own unique situation. And I don't want to speak for City of Reno, but I know they've been kind of doing some analysis around school zones and defining those and looking at safety considerations. So we're very happy to see them working with that. And we're certainly going to be partnering with them to kind of further that analysis. That kind of answer your question? Okay.
Hi. So 5th Street and the southern portion of Virginia Street, part of the pilot project, both of them had a very different characteristic and feeling than what happened between the 100 block of North Virginia Street up to 5th Street. And it seemed to be more stable. It seemed to have it was more well thought out, I guess you could say, more painted properly, and one lane on each side of the street with many businesses, versus those other two areas I talked about, 100 block of Virginia Street up to 500, where we kind of seemed to change between one side of the street versus having lanes on either side of the street. My intuition tells me that if a street designer were actually putting permanent lanes in there, that wouldn't have been the case. It wouldn't have switched around willy-nilly in the middle of a business district like that. And also, would you say it would be more accurate to characterize what happened in the micromobility project as we're testing out different types of designs in one place, rather than thinking of it as we're thinking about putting this here and what you see is what you're going to get? I think I'm coming at this from a perspective of someone who uses a bicycle as their primary mode of transportation, also listening to the very valid concerns from business owners saying this killed my business because I don't have any car traffic. Do you think it was because of that? What I'm saying, it was like testing out different types of designs in one place versus really analyzing and finding out what the best design is, such as what Gail did.
Yep. You want to take that one, Katie?
Sure. So that was the purpose, to test out different types of features and compare one against another, or so that someone could ride through one corridor and interact with different types of features to be able to provide feedback on a variety of features in a constrained area. So you aren't having to ride all over town to try out different features. And you're 100% correct. One of the difficulties in design is the entering and exiting of different types of features. So that would be evaluated anytime permanent installations would come to place. Continuity, connectivity, that's the key to the connected network moving forward.
And it was a pilot. It was a pilot project. We want to emphasize that. It was a pilot to test out these features for all of the reasons that we gave. Any other questions? We're going to go online.
We'll go online to Joe Klein.
Hi, my name is Joe Klein. I'm an experienced bicycle commuter and fitness rider. And first of all, I commend the city for moving forward with this sort of study of other modes of transportation. But one of the things that inhibits me from bicycling downtown to patronize businesses downtown and to attend events downtown where I use bicycle as my transportation is a perception, perhaps on my part, about limited bicycle parking security. And I'm curious whether that question came up in your study or what the situation is nationally about that, and perhaps what remedies might be to make people like me more confident in bicycling downtown.
Well, thank you for that feedback. We did receive similar comments through the survey and through correspondence with the city of secure bike parking in the downtown area adjacent to places that people want to go. And so the city is evaluating options for more secure bike parking and looking and evaluating what that would look like. We have been steadily increasing the number of bike racks. I do realize though that there is still concern with the security on those bike racks. So the city is evaluating additional options.
I want to chime in there a little bit more. The city is also looking at federal funding opportunities for all kinds of infrastructure. And one of those things would be bike racks, secure bike racks. So with all of the work that we've put into this study and future that we're going to be doing here soon, that will give us more opportunity to be ranked higher for funding opportunities for this infrastructure. I do have a question to, I had a gentleman here, the Dr. Iliescu had asked me to ask. What's that? Oh, sure.
First of all, the girls are wonderful. They put all the angels up here, so we have to listen to. But you don't give us much time, and you take point. I've been here 55 years. Okay. I researched this very carefully before, because I have another problem, as to who owns what property out there. How can we work together? Well, in all the research I've done with attorneys and people that are planners, including people that survey your property and knows it, they all say, doctor, the property owner owns the property in front of him. He has a right, this is a law, get in and out of his property and go to the main traffic and get out. And so the question came up, how did this happen? Well, Tom and Bill lived next door to each other some years ago, along with us. And Tom says to Bill, listen, Bill, you got your garage in the back. I have to walk all the way around the block to get to I got a little area in here I can take with a shortcut. Why don't you let me use that? And excuse me, not contagious. And he says, oh, I think I'll let you use it, but if I sell my property. Read the next door neighbor down the way. And eventually got public right away. People can use the site, communicate. And then the question came down, well, okay, well, who owns that? Well, the owner owns the property, owns one of the property all the way sometimes. This the city can't afford. And buy 1,000 different. He said, well, let's do what we call an easement. Well, and I know you know. Let's give everybody, probably can use a portion of their to the other. In turn, they're going to divide up. Worked out. Now we have an easement where we can walk. And if you go around town, that's really a sidewalk. Go around town, you'll see it varies many times. 3 feet, if you go by the golf course, on one side, there's no sidewalk. The question is, now with the bicycles coming, this is a public easement. Put a bicycle, and that's the only easement you have on. He granted that easement. Bicycles, they can't just use the rest of it. The rest of it belongs to us. They're going to use that same one where the public is using. That's the only permission they have from each one of the private owners. Just think if they didn't have that. RTC or anybody could come any part of your property. Our property, work our butt off. Whether you're a doctor, whether you're a carpenter, the biggest expense you have is your home. Now, what are you going to do with that? Are you going to create a secondary easement for bicycles only? And if so, the street is only so wide. What happens to the little businesses there? And all these easements and bicycles and people trying to walk, and they're separate, and the owner's still paying the tax, and who knows how the responsibility is. Later says, well, the city, it was that you didn't shovel your side. Heard you were responsible. If I'm responsible. Finish. No, you're just. Please ask those questions. Ask your attorneys, are they going to have a separate easement? What happens to the people in there? You're going to set laws. You guys are crazy. Nothing personal.
Great comment, and we will take that back to our attorneys. But want to take the next call?
Yeah, I see if I can wrap all these questions because they really are interconnected. And I did ask a few of them last week online, and they really didn't get answered. I'm glad the RTC is here. Just start out, just to give an idea, the snapshot for whatever they did on the study, I think we said it was about 5%. Department of Transportation puts micromobility at a 0.6% nationwide, so maybe a little different here. But within that, the Department of Commerce puts 99.4% of autos. So in other words, let me just rephrase that. So you want to disrupt 99.4% of auto traffic to get 0.6% micromobility, and then the Department of Commerce is the auto traffic commuting for commerce spends 96.7 more. Now, I will be really clear. I've had a bunch of great conversations with Kai, and us downtown business owners aren't against bicyclists. It's just there's not the room on Virginia Street. Your own RTC in April of 2019 wrote an alternative for a two-way cycle track on Virginia Street was the only alternative found not. Then it was followed up by Headway 2019. They said the traffic disruption about having bicycles on Virginia Street are going to be great. Now, what has changed within that? Now, I realize that this is probably a foregone conclusion because everything was going on Center Street until a certain letter was sent by a certain casino company that disrupted everything. You guys were 30% complete on the bicycle micromobilities on Center Street. So I'd like to know what's changed in these because it sounds to me like the traffic's going to be horrible and bicyclists are going to be in danger by trying to stuff them on Virginia Street. And within that, that's up on the follow-up there with you. I know they're going to be going in both directions. You get two-way direction, but how do you account for left-hand turning for vehicle and left-hand turning for the micromobility at intersections? Because you're no longer going to have a left turn between 1st and 5th Street.
I'll be happy to maybe help address that question. Then Sarah, please weigh in. So Dale Keller, Director of Engineering for the RTC. So one of many, we have a great team. So every bike plan needs a car plan. So everything needs to work together in the downtown corridor. We talked about the downtown circulation plan that was in the 2050 regional transportation plan. So all needs to be in unison. We can't just have one, not the other, right? We can't just, right, exactly. So correct. So as we look into the next steps that are being taken and the next action needs to be taken by City Council as well as the RTC board, to understand what is the vision of Virginia Street. And there's gives and takes on all of those. And as we make those presentations, we'll talk about if this is the placemaking study moves forward with bike lanes and putting or 1 lane northbound, southbound, what does that mean for traffic? How do you circulate traffic in and out of that? So those are part of the discussions that need to continue.
We, as business owners will tell you, there was more cars using those enclosed bike facilities than the bicyclers. They're still riding on the sidewalks, as I'm sure at one center show. I'm just trying to really find an amicable, because it was literally, which here, 96% of auto people do commerce to get there to the location, compared to 4%. That wasn't far off of how much our business was down. We were down 80% in the first month you guys put that.
I just wanted to make a point on mode share, which you brought up, which is a really interesting subject, is that we didn't pull the 5% mode share out of thin air. It's this is just an interesting fun fact for people. So the 5% mode share is based on similar cities, and there's a number of cities that have seen this mode share. And why we're comparing it is because these are the kind of tools that they've applied to achieve this mode share, and they have very similar like topography, weather, in a lot of cases worse weather, and also suburban development patterns, which is really interesting to us. And they've seen with implementation of their network, mode share growth over time. So it didn't start large, but it did grow over time. And so some of these similar cities, just for a reference point, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Portland, Oregon, smaller Missoula, Montana, and let's see, what was else on my list? I left my list, but I just thought people would think that was interesting. It is based on other cities' data. So we're looking to copy their implementation in a way that fits Reno and is suitable for what is going on in our city, to achieve that goal of the mode share that they have really actually seen. So just
Hi, this is Randy Collins. I just wanted to kind of give maybe a little perspective and history on this. I've had my business for 50 years, Midtown. I was involved with the RTC and planning stages for the bicycle pedestrian group that we had together, and it was Becca over there can tell you when we did this. One of the big things we accomplished was not only bike lanes, reduce traffic and road diets, but we also looked at Center Street as the offset to not having on Virginia Street when they remodeled with the Virginia Street remodel project. So that came up and I thought that was great. And just like he mirrored there, my question is what happened to that? That study was vetted. It had NABS meetings. We went through a lot of different steps into it. It was a cycle track, so it was not just benefiting mode of transportation, also benefiting the community that they could use it. People could use it, baby strollers, a cycle track. It seemed to have gotten derailed arbitrarily, maybe deliberately along the way. I don't know, but where's it sit now and how can we revise it? Because there's TAP money available to do that, to not only build it, construct it, and enforce it. That's one of my, what happened to Center Street?
So Dale Keller, once again, Director of Engineering for RTC. So Center Street is at a 30% design. That's where it stands right now. There's been other things that have been going along with the downtown Reno. And one of those things that's been changing is the Virginia Street placemaking study. So that is reaching the conclusion. You saw in the next step slides, you pull that back up, is that's going to be presented back to City Council here this month. Is that correct? April. Next month in April. And so we have to understand exactly what is Virginia Street going to look like. That's going to be one of the, I think, overall visions of downtown, and how does these different types of modes, and we look into all the different RTP, excuse me, regional transportation, bike, micromodal plans that we have, and together, how's it all fit in the network, right? We talked about every bike plan needs a car plan. So that's one thing we need to look into. There's things that are being changed and other parameters, inputs that are being changed. We need to evaluate that. So we'll have future decisions as we look in these next steps. We begin more public input. Once this wraps up for the Virginia Street placemaking study, then we need to talk about what does that mean for the overall network as we continue to evaluate different options or what's the best options. Let me pause right there 1 second. This presentation is about the different types of tools we're trying to look into. So regardless of what option comes out, this meeting is about those type of tools. And this is the start, not the end. There's a lot more public input, public process that's going to be detailed further along.
And we kind of landed at a little over an hour now. We don't want to stop the dialogue, the back and forth, although we do want to get to you since you didn't get to make a comment. So after that, we could definitely continue this conversation where the RTC and City of Reno are available to continue the dialogue. We have some boards with some maps and some exhibits that we can really talk through and continue the conversation. But I do want to get to you as well. But
I just have a question. You're going to be presenting this to the City Council. When you show your diagrams, your graphs, and you have 96% of us graphs. It's not really clear to me what the numbers are. If you have an increase 50%, the number you're looking at is 10 automobiles that are giving their percentage. Looking at with these LiDAR calculations, person can refer to many being compared volume.
Great feedback. I really appreciate that. And yes, in the study itself, it will talk about the total numbers, not just percentages. We're trying to cover a lot. I realize we're trying to cover a lot of data in a very short amount of time, and that's difficult to do kind of in this environment, but that will all be available. And if you want to continue the discussion or have additional questions, we can definitely do that as well.
Is concerning, and this has been addressed by several people in the group, is if there is an agenda that is pushed forward to prove or to show or favor under any circumstance, we can take those same statistics and show anything. So we need to be honest with the people of our community. We do have seniors living in the Palladio, have family that lives. And we have seen innumerable changes. We saw all of the parking taken off Virginia Street, businesses that we own a lot. Prominent suffered immeasurably because the parking was taken off. I was told at the time they widened those sidewalks, taken off. The parking was because of the employees at the casinos were parking in those parkings. That discouraged a lot of people in the community thinking about coming downtown because they don't want to park in casino. Things that the city has done that have put the city in this situation. People coming down had skyways that were put in between casinos that took of the street. Went down properties and put those because of things.
It is complex, and there's a lot of compromises. And I really want to say thank you all for coming, and we appreciate your participation, appreciate your comments. I'm going to give one last plug for the comment cards.
Yes, because we want to continue this dialogue. There'll be more public engagement, but for the specific items, we want to make sure that they're captured. We have physical comment cards if you're that's the method you prefer, or we also have an online comment card. QR code should take you right there. Ooh, going out with a bang. No, that's all I got. We're gonna end there.
All right, I guess I'll finish this. All right, so yeah, we will have staff available to continue discussing here in the room and out by the exhibits. And yes, if you're joining with us online, you can use this QR code on our website. If you go to reno.gov/engage and click Micromobility, the comment card is also available there, and we will have the recording of this presentation posted by tomorrow. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.